Let's quickly go over it. So we need to complete the square to do these. So the quick way to do that is I just say, well, we have x squared plus 4x plus something to complete the square, plus y squared minus 10. Woo, that line's going crazy. Y plus something to complete that square equals negative 28 plus what we added on the other side. So to complete the square with x squared and 4 over x, we're going to notice our b is 4, so we're going to have 4 over 2. And we're going to have squared, which means I go to the right side and write a 4 over 2 squared. Then to complete the square with those y values, we're going to have that negative 10 is my b, so I have negative 10 divided by 2 squared. And so I go to the other side and do negative 10 divided by 2 squared. Now the whole point of doing this is to put these in binomials. So the x squared plus 4x plus 4 over 2 squared can be rewritten as x plus 4 over 2 squared, which is going to become a 2 in just a second. Plus my y squared minus 10y plus negative 10 over 2 is going to become y minus 10 over 2, because once again, you're pulling down that whole negative 10 over 2, and I pull down this 4 over 2. The squared goes up there. And that's going to equal negative 28 plus 2 plus negative 5 squared, which is 25. So your end result would be x plus 2 squared plus y minus 5 squared is going to equal, that should have been 4, not 2. It should be negative 28 plus 4, because it would have been 2 squared, which would give me 4. Going too fast, but we ended up with 1. So our center would be negative 2, 5, and our radius would equal 1. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, good. Questions from the homework, then real quick. We're going to do them quick. Yes, Will. 53. Same. So 53 is just completing the square. Something like this could be on the test. You have to just do the work. You can't stop because there are fractions. So let me take a picture of it. So what I would do is I would subtract x over 2 from both sides, which would give me a negative 1/2. So my b value would be negative 1/2 over 2 squared. For the y, I would subtract this, or add y over 3 to both sides, which would give me y squared plus 1 over 3y, which means my b is 1/3 over 2 squared. Add the same stuff over there. You keep working down, and you will get up to 1/4 and negative 1/6. So the only thing is, it just has fractions in it. Don't stop because there's fractions. You're going to do the exact same things. All right, is there a specific question on this, or was it just?
No, that was it.
Okay. Yep, just fractions. Deal with them. Love them. It's life. All right, other questions? Yeah? I did put them both over 2. I did. It's just a very sloppy 2 because it does turn into a 3. It is very sloppy, so I'll give you that. I think I wrote a 3, and then I immediately put rather than erasing, I just put, because I'm writing so small, I just put a 2 over it. So it does equal that 3 then. Other questions? Yeah?
First, 55C, how would you find the radius?
For 55C, so you'd find a midpoint.
Yeah.
We would find the midpoint. Let me take a picture of it really quick because that's a really good question. So to find this center point, we would find the midpoint. We find out it's 1, 2. Well, anytime you know the center and a point along the circle, you get the radius because it's just the distance from the center, which would be 1, 2, to either one of these points. And I picked 3, 5. So it's the distance from 1, 2 to the 3, 5 will give us our radius, which would have been square root of 13. So that's where I got that 13 from. All right, other questions? I think the rest should be okay because like on this problem, I did say find the midpoint and I did show you which distance I did find. So I try my best to put as much work on there as I can. Otherwise, we are going to just start today's lesson. Today's lesson, once again, will be a whole bunch of information, but hopefully it's a whole bunch of information you've seen before, and it's nothing brand new. So the first thing we're going to talk about is slope. With slope, most of the time, we use an M to stand for slope. And slope is always going to equal our change in y over change in x. That delta just stands for change. So it's change in y over change in x. So remember, your y values are up, down, and your x values are left, right. That's where that rise over run comes in. Well, to get a change in a value, to know how much it increased or how much it decreased, you're just going to take one value and subtract the other one away from it. So if I get an 8 on something and a 3 on something else, to figure out how much I increased or decreased, I would just do 8 minus 3. The same thing's going to happen here. To get my change in my x values, I'm just going to take one of my y values and subtract away the other one. So we just list that as y sub 2 minus y sub 1. Then on the bottom, we're going to have x sub 2 minus x sub 1. This is how you'll see it written in every single math book. I'm going to tell you picking which one's your second point, which one's your first point is kind of arbitrary. So you could also rewrite this as being y sub 1 minus y sub 2, as long as on the bottom you have x sub 1 minus x sub 2. So as long as your one point matches up with the other point, you will get the same answer. All right, so don't spend 8 hours on the test asking which one's the second point and which one's the first point. It doesn't matter, just call one of them your first point, call the other one your second point, make sure they match up. And as always, we do have a little bit of information on this, and it's the fact that both of our x's cannot be the same value. So I just put with x sub 1 not equaling x sub 2, because if those two things equal, you're going to have a 0 in a denominator and you'll have no slope. It'll be all rise and no run. All right, that's slope. That leads us into our first formula for a line, and that is point slope form. You're going to know to use point slope form anytime you have a point and you know the slope and you have to come up with a formula. Well, that's exactly what we're going to have here. We have 2 points, but let's first, I want to write something up here really, really quick. Just remember that this y sub 1, this x sub 1 just come from the point. So that's just a point. And this m, as always, is our slope. I don't want to forget anything because I'm kind of just pushing through. So you need slope and a point to use slope point form or point slope form. So our example is find the equation of a line through the point -1, 4 and 2, 3. Once again, I need a point and I need slope. Well, I have 2 points to choose from, so I actually have too many points. The only thing I'm missing is my slope. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually find the slope of this. Well, our slope is going to equal that change in y, which would be y sub 2 minus y sub 1, over my change in x, which would be x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Well, in this case, we just have to pick which point is going to be our second point. I'm going to pick 2, 3 because it's in the order as my second point. I'll pick -1, 4 as my first point. So we're going to put our y's on top. So I'm going to have 3 minus 4 on top. And I'm going to have 2 minus a -1 on the bottom. Real quick, note that this 3, 2 matches up with this 2, 3 here. And this 4, -1 matches up with this -1, 4 here. They have to line up. If you do it out of order, you're going to come up with a negative when you should have came up with a positive slope. All right, well, this is just going to equal 3 minus, let's get back to black. We are going to have 3 minus 4, which is -1. 2 minus a -1 is going to be 3. We now have a -1/3. The second part says use the slope in either point. It doesn't matter which point you use, you'll come up with the exact same answer. So if you use negative 1, 4, you'll get the same answer as if I used 2, 3. So pick either point. I'm going to use point negative 1, 4. And we know my slope equals negative 1/3. Now to throw that into point slope form, we're going to have y minus 4 is going to equal the slope of negative 3 times x minus my x value, which is negative 1. So that 4 goes there, that negative 1 goes there. Yes?
Do you want us to simplify that to x plus 1?
Well, I'm going to go back to the original question because something else has to happen. I didn't read it. I just want to point it out now. If we read the question carefully, it does say solve for y if possible. If I didn't ask for that, I do want to see this as plus. But we do actually have to go further. We actually have to solve for y if possible. It will almost always be possible. So we are going to have y minus 4 equals negative 1/3 x, negative 1/3, and that is, just like Pablo said, actually plus 1. So I have 1/3 plus, or negative 1/3 plus 1, which would be minus 1/3. All right, then we have to add 4 to both sides. So plus 4 here. Let's write that over here. So we are going to have y equals that negative 1/3 x minus 1/3 plus 4. But rather than writing 4, I'm going to write 12 over 3. So we have a common denominator, and we're going to have y equals negative 1/3 x plus 11 over 3. And in fact, that's in slope-intercept form, which we're going to talk about in a second. So solving for y is just asking for slope-intercept form. Any questions about point-slope form? Once again, you know to use point-slope form if I give you a point and you find the slope. All right, point and knowing a slope will mean point-slope. All right, slope-intercept form. That's our next form. That is y equals mx plus b, where our slope is that m. I'm going to mark that. That's our slope. Remember, it's rise over run. And this b is our y-intercept. But your y-intercept is actually going to be 0, comma, b. That's really the key parts about slope-intercept. So let's go through the problems. It says identify the slope and y-intercept of y equals 1/2 x minus 2. Our slope is going to be that 1/2. And our y-intercept, well, that's going to be this whole negative 2. So it's actually going to be 0, negative 2. Our y-intercept is the point 0, negative 2. The next one says identify the slope and y-intercept of 2x minus 3y. In just a second, we'll find out that's called standard form. Standard form's kind of useless. So is point slope, just in the fact that point slope is just a tool to get to slope-intercept. To find my slope and y-intercept, I do have to put it into slope-intercept form, which means I'm going to move the x's to the right-hand side. So we'll have negative 3y equals negative 2x plus 6. I would divide both sides by a negative 3 to give me y equals a positive 2 over 3x. And this is going to be a minus 2. Maybe I'll write that down. So we divided everything by negative 3. All right, that's going to tell me my slope for this one is going to equal 2 over 3. And the y-intercept is going to equal a negative 2, which would be the point 0, negative 2. Once something is in slope-intercept form, it should be super easy to graph because you just need slope and a y-intercept to graph something. Our slope is going to equal either 3 or 3 over 1. I usually picture it as 3 over 1, so I know it's rise over run. My y-intercept is going to equal 0, negative 1. Let's plot 0, negative 1 is right there. That's my 0, negative 1. My slope is 3 over 1. I am going to go up 3. So that's plus 3. I'm going to go right 1, plus 1. I'm going to put a point there. And that is good enough in this class to draw a line. We know it's linear, so you just need 2 points to graph a line. All right, continuing on. The next thing we're going to talk about is standard form. Standard form is ax plus by equals c, but there's a couple stipulations on it. A, b, and c, so stipulation number 1, a, b, and c are usually integers. In this class, they will always be integers, because if you look at that first example, I said using only integers. That's going to be your sign that they have to be integers. The other stipulation, a needs to be positive. So a is going to be bigger than or equal to 0. It can equal 0, in which case you just have like 5y equals a number that is a linear equation. It's just going to be a vertical line. So your a value has to be bigger than 0. It has to be a positive. It has to be a positive. Write that down. Oh, right down there. All right, so it says find the equation of a line 0, 1/3 with slope 1/2. Write the equation in standard form using only integers. So once again, in standard form, your a has to be bigger than 0, and everything has to be integers. So the first thing I'm looking at is we have to find the equation of 0, 1/3 with a slope of 1/2. You can either use point slope, because you do know the point, and you do know the slope. However, that point is one specific, so we can use something else besides point slope, because this is actually a y-intercept, and this is my slope. So although we can use point slope form, it might be easier just to use slope intercept form. So that's going to be y equals, my slope will be 1/2 x plus 1/3. Now I need to have all the x's on one side and all the y's on the same side, and just that 1/3 on the right side. So I'm going to subtract 1/2 x from both sides to give me negative 1/2 x plus y equals 1/3. Now, for this to be in standard form, we need a, b, and c to be integers, and we need a to be bigger than 0. So I'm going to multiply both sides by a negative 6. That is our lowest common denominator. Now I'm going to distribute this to everything, so make sure you don't forget to distribute the x, the y, and the 1/3. And that's going to result in negative 6 divided by negative 2 is a positive 3x. Minus 6y equals a negative 2. That is standard form. My a is bigger than 0, and everything is integers. Make sure you have the fact that a has to be bigger than 0 on this. I will give you the integer part on the test. I will say make sure you use only integers, but I will not give you the a portion. You have to know a is positive. You don't make it positive, you lose a point on that problem. Super easy point to lose. So make sure you know that a has to be bigger than 0 or equal to. All right, next thing is parallel lines. The only thing we really care about parallel lines are the fact that our slopes have to be equal. They have to be equal. I'm going to make a change to this graph real quick. This is not the graph of 3x minus 7. This is 3x plus 2. That is a graph of 3x plus 2. All right, we're supposed to find the equation in slope-intercept form of the line through 1, negative 4 that is parallel to y equals 3x plus 2. So we're looking for a line that's parallel to this one. Note that this 3 is going to tell me that the slope, I'm going to call it m sub 1, equals 3 because we're going to have two kind of slopes. We have that line, and we're drawing the line that's parallel to it. If that slope is equal to 3, the line parallel to it will also have a slope of 3 as well. So the line parallel will also have slope equal to 3. So that means if I'm talking about my second slope, that's going to equal 3. So my slope is 3, and the point I'm trying to go through is 1, -4. It's not a y-intercept, it's just a point, so we are going to use point-slope form to solve this. So we're going to go y minus that y value, which is -4, equals my slope, which is 3, times x minus 1. Once again, these points came from just the point that was given. That's where that negative, and that's where that 1 came from. And it says to put it in slope-intercept form. So let's go ahead and solve for y. So we're going to have y plus 4 equals 3x minus 3. Subtract 4 on both sides, and we'll have y equals 3x minus 7. That is slope-intercept form. I'm going to go ahead and plot it. I didn't ask you to, but I'm going to go ahead and plot it to make sure it is parallel. It's always a good idea just to, in your head, see if you can picture it to make sure it's going to match up. So my y-intercept is at -7, so 0, -7 is my y-intercept. My slope is 3 over 1, so that means I would go up 3 over 1. And if I drew a line through that guy, we would have a parallel line that does go through the point 1, -4. Because 1, -4 is actually, let's circle it. It would be this point here. Like I said, the big thing you want to care about with parallel lines is slopes are equal. All right, so as soon as you read parallel lines, think slopes are equal. Big part. Because perpendicular lines is going to be slightly different. So parallel lines, slopes are equal. Perpendicular lines, our slopes are going to be, and let me highlight this. So our slopes are negative reciprocals. They are complete opposites. We're going to take the reciprocal, and we're going to multiply it by a -1. So if my slope is -1/2, and I want to find the perpendicular line to that, its slope would be a +2 over 1. We're going to find the negative reciprocal. So our thing says, find the equation of the line perpendicular to 3x minus 4y equals 8, and containing the point -2, 1. Write the answer in slope-intercept form. So the first thing I need to do is I need to find my first slope. I need to find the slope of this line here. So we're going to find the slope. So we're going to find, and I'm going to call it m sub 1. It's our first slope. So in order to find that, we need to subtract 3x from both sides. We'll have -4y equals a -3x plus 8. Divide both sides by a -4. You're going to have y equals a +3 over 4x minus 2. So our m sub 1 is going to equal 3 over 4. Now let's talk about the perpendicular line. The perp line. We're going to call it m sub 2. What's my perpendicular line slope going to be? Think about it. What is my perpendicular line's slope going to be? Sammy? It's going to be -4 over 3. I'm going to take the reciprocal, multiply it by -1 to get a -4 over 3. So once again, this right here is the negative reciprocal. And we already were given a point. We were given the point. So we have our slope equals negative 4 over 3. We have a point, which equals negative 2, 1. Since I have a point slope, I'm going to use point slope to find out my equation. I'm going to go ahead and do it underneath the graph so I have a little bit more room. So we're going to have y minus whatever my y value is. That is 1. Equals my slope is negative 4 over 3 times x minus my x value, which is negative 2. So we're going to have x plus 2 in there. All right, it does say put it in slope-intercept form. So we're going to have y minus 1 equals negative 4 thirds x, and it's going to be plus 2 times 4 thirds, so it'll be a negative 8 thirds here. Then we're going to add 1 to both sides. Let's do that up here. So we are going to have y equals a negative 4 thirds x minus 8 over 3 plus 1, which would be plus 3 over 3. So in slope-intercept form, we're going to have negative 4 over 3x minus 5 over 3. If I was to plot this on the graph, it's going to look pretty perpendicular. Not 100% all the time because this is a fraction. So when I plot negative 5 thirds as my y-intercept, well, 5 thirds is almost 2. So maybe I'll put my point right there. And it does say it's going to be negative 4, 3. So I'm going to go down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to go right 3, 1, 2, 3. And if I plotted that, that's a terrible snap grid. Something like that. It does look perpendicular. Closer we're going to come with fractions, not being right on square lines. I think the huge takeaway from today's lessons, I think we know how to do point slope. I think we know how to do slope intercept. It's just little mistakes that are going to catch us on those. The big thing is, if I say parallel lines, you should immediately think same slope. If I say perpendicular lines, you should immediately think reciprocal multiplied by negative 1. That's the stuff that usually trips people up on this test, is the parallel and perpendicular, because we spend a lot less time talking about those. That being said, we do have a test this Friday. I am going to check your review, which you got yesterday. You got your review yesterday. I'm going to check it tomorrow. If you're almost done with it, then you'll be eligible for test corrections. If you are not, then you need to turn it into me completed and corrected on Friday, either before school or right before the test. If I do not get yours, if you do not get checked off tomorrow, make sure everyone's looking at me right now because this is important. If you do not get checked off tomorrow and I don't get your test on Friday, you will not be able to do test corrections. And this is the last test of the mark period. This is going to be their last big score that goes into this. I believe mark period grades are due next Friday, so you will have until next Thursday to maybe even Wednesday. You're not going to have a lot of time to do corrections on this test. So make sure if you know you did bad on the test on Friday, you make time on Monday already to do test corrections, because I'm thinking I might just make it Monday test corrections are due. That'll give me time to grade them all again. All right, questions on that? I do want to quickly say, I know I brought this up yesterday. Look at your number 13 on your review, if you didn't change it. Number 13 on the review is wrong. Number 13 has the values 50 and 55 in that order. That 50 should actually be 45. That 55 should actually be 40. Otherwise, the rest of the time is yours to work on the homework and ask questions.